podcast that you're listening to is being presented to you with the cooperation of the SJ Network. If you're a person who needs a publicist and you want to appear on podcasts, contact Stephen Joyner at s-j-network.com. Let's get on with the show.
Hey, Dudley, today's the day that the guys from the You Hate to See It podcast swing by.
Those are the guys that are drinking when talking about true crime. How ironic.
What's ironic?
That I commit most of my crimes while I'm drinking.
Well, it also explains the mustache on the mountain lion.
Ah, yes. Mardi Gras 2017. Wonderful times with vicious animals.
Attention, rebels of the Sherpalution. Today's podcast is brought to you by Audible. We would like to give you a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial simply by heading to www.audibletrial.com/Sherpa. There are over 180,000 titles of audiobooks and podcasts, including this one, to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. And now, the one and only Mr. Bruce will lead you into the Sherpa Chalet. As a reminder, on Fridays, ladies drink free at the Sherpa Chalet nightclub, provided that you are a lady wildebeest.
Welcome to Too Many Podcasts, the podcast about podcasts. Now, podcasting from the Sherpa Chalet on Mount Podcastia, here's your host, Jim, the podcast Sherpa.
Hello there, rebels of the Sherpalution. It is I, Jim, the podcast Sherpa, welcoming you to another episode of Too Many Podcasts, and we are here coming to you from the Sherpa Chalet. I hope you've had a wonderful week, and we've got a wonderful show for you, thanks to my guests today.
Who's our guest today, Sherpa?
Yes, that's right. I said guests. So we've got two of them, Jeff and Nick. They are from the podcast You Hate to See It. And it's a lot of back and forth and crazy conversations and true crime and a whole bunch of stuff. I got to sit down with these guys and, usually their podcast can be a little sweary and there's a little drinking involved. It's kind of like me in church. Did I say that? No, I didn't say that. I was kidding. But anyway, I got to talk to Nick and Jeff. There is a third host named Adam, but unfortunately he was not able to attend, and we make up excuses as to why he wasn't there. I was going to say he went to elope with the Kardashian, but I don't know. I don't know how that one would have went off. Instead, I went and made a very dated Oscars joke, so I apologize for that. But I'm sorry that Adam couldn't be with us because I had a very enjoyable conversation with Nick and Jeff. And you know what? Let's head on down to the conference room at the Sherpa Chalet, and you guys can hear exactly what I'm talking about. Let's go. Hello there, rebels of the Sherpalution. We are in the Hate to See It room. Why? Because my guests today are 2/3 of a show called You Hate to See It. And we are talking to Nick and Jeff tonight from the Chi-Town area. Do they still call it Chi-Town? I don't know. We'll find out. That'll be the first burning question.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't think I've ever heard that
in a while. No, it's been a while since I've heard Chi-Town.
Maybe if I go to like a baseball game, like
I just call it a dumpster fire now.
Yeah, it's something out here.
Yeah,
or maybe if we were all in the 30s. Say, Mac, you know how to hit the Chi-Town?
Yeah, I think.
No one talks like that.
I think I've heard Second City more than I've heard Chi-Town in my life. I say I've heard Second City more.
I don't even know what that means. So
you said tangents. You're getting a tangent. Second City is because it was the second largest city in the country for a time after New York. So New York was number one. Chicago was number two. And then there's the Windy City because it's so fucking. Actually, I think I hear Windy City probably the most.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Windy City, just because it's so horrible.
True.
Sorry, I'm swearing. Jeez, I am so sorry.
It's okay.
I'm gonna get yelled at. We were at a party a couple months ago with one of our friends' nieces, and yes. I almost got beaten by the mother for the amount of times I swore. And I'm trying. I really am. I am really trying.
I'll tell you a funny story. I've actually had guests on who swear a lot on their podcasts, and to watch them and just the restraint on their faces as they're trying not to curse, and they don't,
That will be
Just
us.
another word.
Yeah. I've never been in a work environment where swearing was not allowed.
Yeah, I mean that's just our job. So
Yeah, So I've never been reprimanded for swearing other than by my mother.
But I think that's why they kicked me out of that daycare, though.
yeah, that's why.
So you guys are all best friends. Then you've all known each other. How did you meet?
Nick and I met our sophomore year of college. I transferred to Western Illinois University, and Nick became my roommate my first year there, which was my sophomore year. And so we lived together our entire sophomore year. Junior year, I moved into a house with a couple of my other friends. And then through a mutual friend at a party is where we met Adam. And then Adam basically just stuck around my house for the next 2 years because he just basically lived on my couch. Like every day after. Yeah. It's like we were on the main street of the university. And like we're a party house basically. So Adam was just after class every day, just in my living room when I would walk in. So that's how we all met. And yeah, it just went from there. We were the three that bonded the most out of the whole group. So
who was probably the sloppier roommate between the two of you guys?
Probably me.
yeah, it was Nick.
Yeah,
definitely. Pay no attention to how garbage my background looks right now.
No, if you could, right there, boxes.
Over here, clean. We record podcasts.
Jimmy John's wrapper, everything.
We have wild stories from when we were roommates because, yeah, there's Nick's uncleanliness mixed with the fact that I would only be in our dorm room for like 5 hours a day because I worked 2 jobs for during my sophomore year.
Okay.
And then there was Nick's night terrors.
Those did happen.
Those were always a fun time.
Do you still have them, Nick?
My girlfriend hasn't told me that I do. So I haven't woken up in her room standing over her while she's screaming. So that hasn't happened yet.
What is that like?
I don't know. I don't know. I'm asleep.
Okay, Jeff, you want to?
You're gonna have to ask Jeff because I'm out. I learned about it the next morning.
Yeah. So from the psychological background of that, it's just you're asleep, but there's some part of your brain that's still like in the active mode, basically.
So have you ever heard of like sleep paralysis?
I have.
It's the antithesis of that. So whereas sleep paralysis is you're conscious and awake, but your body is paralyzed.
Mm-hmm.
A night terror or sleepwalking is your body is not paralyzed, so you're moving, but you're asleep dreaming.
Okay.
Yeah. So then I have both. So it's a real fun time. Both of which involve Jeff too.
Yeah. So one of the times I came home from work, it was like between midnight and 1 a.m. So I get changed, get ready for bed. I had the lofted bed and I'm 6'4". So with the lofted bed from the room from there to the ceiling is maybe 2 to 2.5 feet. So it's like I crawl into bed and I'm laying down. Maybe like 10 minutes goes by and all of a sudden Nick screams, just scream. It's a dorm room. It's like 10 by 10, if that even. It's not a big room. And he just screams. And I sit up, whack my head off the ceiling because someone's screaming. Obviously, I'm going to now react kind of like, okay, what's happening? So yeah, I whack my head off the ceiling and I roll over now a little bit dazed. Look at Nick, who's like on his bed across the room. And he's sitting up, just staring at our door. And I'm like looking at it. My eyes are like still adjusting to the dark. And I'm looking at it. And I'm looking at him. I'm like checking under my bed. And I'm like, Nick, it's like talking to a dog. It's like, what's wrong? What do you see, buddy? Like, what is it? And he doesn't respond. And I'm like, what is it? And he just rolls over and goes to sleep. Like he lays back down and rolls over. I'm like, okay, weird, whatever. About 15 more minutes goes by. He does it again. Same thing happens with me. I sit up, whack my head off the ceiling, and I roll over. He's still just staring at the door. I'm looking around. I get out of my bed. I'm like looking. I don't see anything. And finally, I just go, Nick, what the F is going on? And he just turns and looks at me, grabs his pillow, hugs it, and then curls up in a ball and is just back asleep. And that was the end of his night terrors for that night.
Wow.
That was the, after saying, yeah, I'll be your roommate. That was like 2 weeks later. Fun time.
That happened to my freshman year roommate where I woke up standing over him because his bed probably came up to my chest and I woke up or I didn't wake up, but he woke up to me standing over him, like a couple inches from his face. And he's like, "Hey, you okay?" And I walked away from his bed, went into my flung the door open to the closet and started going, "Where are my sweaters? My sweaters, where are my sweaters?" And then he yelled at me to go back to sleep. Back to sleep.
It was, yeah, they're a wild time.
And I did sleepwalk as a child. So
That's actually a myth when they say that you're not supposed to wake up a sleepwalker, right? You're just supposed to be just gentle with them. Isn't that true?
I wouldn't know about this. So the sleepwalking really only happened when I was pretty young, like probably under 7.
Okay.
And I mean, my parents woke me up. So I'm sorry. Woke me up.
It's okay.
Woke me up because they found me at the door, like at the front door. And they found me at the door. The door was unlocked and they didn't know if I was coming in or about to go out. So like, they don't know, which is they then promptly installed top door hinges, like a lock. So I couldn't unlock the door.
Basically, Nick's parents lived through any early 2000s horror movie for the first couple years of his life.
Mm-hmm. And then I got a dog, and then they got me a dog because I couldn't sleep. And then the dog would wake up and kind of bark if I was walking around. So that was their alarm.
Yeah. So the thing with sleepwalking, you can wake up someone who's sleepwalking. Be prepared for them to not understand anything, because it is like you waking up anyone else who's asleep. They're going to be groggy and confused. It's that you're not supposed to wake them up aggressively. Like you're not supposed to make a loud noise to wake them up, or like you're not supposed to startle them. Because it's just like, it's just like any other person that's asleep. Mm-hmm. So you want to try like coax them out of it. Just make sure they don't walk into anything. Don't grab knives, straightforward stuff.
I'd say it really only happens when I start sleeping in new places, like for long term, because that happened in college whenever I'd get a new room, and it would happen when we moved into a new house when I was a child. That could happen, I guess, yeah. And I don't know about after sophomore year, because I lived by myself for the next 2 years.
Okay.
So, yep. And then sleep paralysis is equally horrifying, but for me,
that'd be scary for anybody. All right. So one of the rules of this show is when there is a team of podcasters that do a podcast and one of them does not show up to the interview, the other 2 members of the team get to make up an excuse as to why that third person isn't here. So if you want to come up with something clever.
What would be a good one?
Adam got arrested for driving a busload of kids.
Okay.
He's a hockey coach, so it makes sense, but that's probably what he's doing.
Yeah, it's probably something with hockey.
Yeah.
I was going to say for faking a gynecologist license, but
I could see that.
Maybe both.
Both?
We can do both.
That would be very
After being arrested for driving around an unmarked school bus of kids, they found out that in his wallet he had a fake gynecologist license. I don't know what that's actually called, but
a medical license.
You know what? Screw you.
That works.
It is in fact a doctor. Are you drinking some Bud Light next?
I am. It's the only thing left in my house that you left, and it's horrendous.
We should talk a little bit about your podcast, guys. You hate to see it.
That's
Please
probably a thing.
Tell me, how did you first get the idea of getting together and doing this podcast?
Man, I've told this story so much lately. Basically, so Nick and I graduated at the same time because, fun fact, Nick and I have the same exact degrees, same major, same minor. We graduated at the same time. So we graduated a semester before Adam did. So we graduated in May. Adam still had another semester. He graduated in December. During that time, Nick and I also worked for the same job, working night shift until, I don't know, I think I left that actually probably right around that.
It was late 2019.
Right around the time Adam graduated is when I left that job. But Adam was graduating. So it was like our first time getting our whole college friend group back together. And we went down for his graduation. And the night before his graduation, we're all sitting around just drinking, hanging out, playing some like card games and stuff. And then there's kind of like, everything kind of winds down. Everyone's just kind of sitting around and everyone's quiet and they're just watching Nick, Adam, and I as we just talk and about random stuff, just being idiots, making fun of each other, just coming up with wild things about different, I don't know, like movies or just anything. Like we just talk. That's like our whole thing. And after we got done, like we noticed no one else was talking. We're like, why is everyone just like sitting around? And one of our friends was like, oh no, this is kind of like what we miss is like just listening to you three baffle and be idiots and just talk. Cause it's like one of the best things, like after a night of drinking, is just sitting around watching you three argue with each other or bull crap and whatever. And then so Adam was like, we could probably make a podcast with that. We're like, yeah. So we sat around and we're like, what would we name it? And I always used to say, oh, you hate to see it whenever anyone did something stupid, messed up, something bad happened. It was just like, well, you hate to see it. And I'd like walk away. And we're like, there we go. That's our name. And it originally started with us talking about things that like we didn't like. And then quickly we realized there's really not that much that you could fill an entire podcast for a long time with that. And then kind of like you said earlier before we started recording, like we kind of learned, we kind of evolved, and we've kind of moved. And I think we finally kind of found our niche now. We're doing more like interview stuff. And then we also do a true crime podcast. So yeah, that's how it started. And that's where we're at now.
You have a segment called Drunk Jury when you discuss the cases?
Yeah, so it's called Drunken Jurors because Nick and I, we both have degrees in law enforcement and our minors are in forensic psychology. So we get drunk like we do. That's our whole thing about our podcast is we drink. So we get drunk and we talk about different true crime cases, some lesser known ones. We've kind of started covering some serial killers. We kind of just whatever we think seems interesting and maybe things that people don't know about that we think they should, or just big name serial killers. So we just get drunk and then Nick and I kind of like, oh, like the cops did something stupid. And like, we can kind of try to explain maybe why they did it or why, yes, they are actually just idiots. Like, and then we do a little bit of like psychological breakdowns. And so, yeah, it's just us drinking, giving like any other true crime podcast, just giving you all the information and then having our own little tangents about it. And there's comedy mixed in there because we are yet again drunken idiots. So we do say some things that probably shouldn't be said, but
it's the cherry on top.
Yeah.
So it's not just a monotone, someone reading you information about something. Because that's actually one of the huge things I hate about true crime podcasts. Because I love true crime, but a lot of true crime podcasts is just one or two people reading into a mic, like from an outline.
Jeff really hates the entire podcast network, apparently.
I do. Not a big fan.
What do you think draws people to true crime podcasts? Because I mean, that is a big chunk of what's out there.
It's the same reason anyone, like just for any of it. And I think Nick would say the same thing. It's amazing what human beings can do to each other. It's just what some other human, like, cause we like, you have your morals, you have your ethics and stuff like that. And then it's like, oh, how could someone just go up and like stab an old lady to death and then like laugh about it and take her money and walk away? It's like, how could someone just fathom to do that? And then that's kind of what people like about true crime is because it's people like giving you that. And then you have from the trial, there's usually psychologists involved that try to break down it's just interesting to see. So we know so little about the human mind that it's just interesting to see how other people's brains work, especially the violent ones, the ones that do the things that most people can't.
There's also the fact that it's there now. Like it's available. If you look at a lot of the statistics, like crime has actually gone down, well, excluding the past 3 or 4 years, which are very big outliers just because of COVID and then the riots and everything. Those are outliers. But if you look at the overall trending statistics, violent crime has gone down, but there's more true crime podcasts. Crime is covered more. That's all because there's with internet and social media, it's just in your face a whole lot more.
Yeah, it's on your phone. You can open up Facebook and maybe like one of the first like 5 things you see is like an article for like a shooting or something that happened.
Exactly. The biggest thing about that is school shootings. The actual statistics of it is it's remained relatively the same, if not gone down some. And it's just that it can be reported so quickly. There can be 24/7 teams from CNN and Fox there within 40 minutes.
They're arriving like minutes after the police are.
So quick to be covered, and then it dominates the news coverage for the next week. Like the Orlando shooting, the Pulse nightclub, I think that one. Yeah, that one. That shit happens in Chicago every other month. It's just that it was the place. There was a CNN news team in the area, and it got the coverage. The president chose to talk about that one, but he didn't choose to talk about one in Chicago. Whatever. They happen. Should they happen? No, obviously not. But the overall trend and statistic is that it's actually
problem with having
with
8 billion people. Well, that and 8 billion people on the planet. We're not all the same. Because it's like the interesting thing. I think that's why people like it so much is like where you like other animals, like you can explain why they do what they do. Like they're doing it because it's natural to them. Like a lion killing a gazelle. Like that's how they eat. Like that's natural to them. A human being killing another human being isn't for food. Like you can't explain why.
We hope
other
not.
than like just other than like, well, I mean, there are people out there that eat people. We've actually covered quite a few of them, and it's absolutely disgusting. But
human interest is drawn to the outlier.
Yeah.
Whether that outlier is a guy who killed 30 kids and ate 4, or that outlier being a U.S. Marine who went back and saved 60 people from an airstrike during World War II, where we as humans are drawn to an outlier. It's why people like watching entrepreneurial success stories in documentaries. It's a success. It's an outlier. A lot of people who start their entrepreneurial thing are going to fail. A lot of people who start their restaurant is going to fail. But if you are a success, people are drawn to you and want to know about that success, that outlier.
And with podcasts, everybody likes a good story too, so it all really melds together.
Mm-hmm. Especially because, it's a podcast. There's no visual. Like you need the meat of the story. You need it all there.
It's no different than a book.
Do love me a good book.
Do you guys have any dream guests for your show?
So Adam and I really want Anthony Birch on. So he's we all love Dungeons and Dragons. So Adam and I listen to a podcast called Dungeons and Daddies. It's like a very, very popular D&D podcast, but they all play characters that are like fathers trying to find their sons in a in a fantasy world. And Anthony Birch is the DM, like the dungeon master of that whole group. But he also made one of my favorite video games. He worked on Borderlands 2. So like that's like mine because he's a podcaster. He likes D&D and he worked on one of my favorite games. Like that's like my dream one. I would also like to talk to Joe Rogan. I would like to be on Joe Rogan. Would I have anything interesting to say? Absolutely not. But I would just like to be there. I think it would be neat to meet Joe Rogan in person.
There's an interesting story behind him, though. A lot of people just know him as the podcaster, but there's just so much that he's done beyond that.
I know him as the Fear Factor guy before anything. So.
Right.
I remember watching his stand-up.
Yeah, I still watch his stand-up. I love his stand-up. I mean, I actually don't really listen to his podcast all that much unless it's someone that I want to. Yeah, it's a guest that I would like to see.
I think the last full interview he did that I listened to is Robert Downey Jr.
Yeah, that was a good one too.
Mm-hmm.
See, because I remember Joe Rogan from the TV show News Radio, and I would love to ask him if he has like a favorite Phil Hartman story, because you got to figure the two of them being on a show together was probably just hilarity, every second.
It's just, I don't know. Some people's personalities are just like, you just want to talk to them like about anything. It doesn't and I think that's why Joe Rogan's podcast works so well. Cause he talks to everyone in different, professions and everything. He just talks to people. And it's so interesting that that's why he's so successful. He can literally talk to anyone about anything. How about you, Nick?
I was just about to ask you. How about it, Nick?
I think probably one of the interviews I'd really love to do is either Scott Snyder, who is a comic book author for DC. He wrote a lot of recent Batman stuff.
Is that Zack Snyder's?
No, they're not related at all. Nope. People get confused by that all the time.
Hey, it's a weird coincidence.
It is, yeah. But either him or a couple of the conspiracy podcasts I listen to, I really like them. One of them is The Belief Hole. I found them, and I wouldn't mind. It's like three brothers, but like I wouldn't mind getting them on just because they have a very similar dynamic to us, but it's just all conspiracy. So, and sober, which is shocking.
So I like that part.
Yeah.
Would that be a novelty for you guys listening to a sober podcast?
Every podcast, well, not every, most of the podcasts I listen to, they're sober. So
Sam,
cheers to them for being able to do that.
Now, I know you actually, you interviewed Larry Hankin recently, right?
Yes. I released like a little bit over a month ago.
Okay.
I was technically there.
Yeah.
I was on my laptop at my girlfriend's place, so I was essentially just not there.
He was there for like the first half, and then he disconnected and never came back.
Yeah, my laptop crapped out.
Larry's awesome though. One of the best, genuinely one of the best people to just listen to. His stories are amazing, and he's a very good storyteller, and he just has so much experience in what he does, and it's just interesting. And he has so many different hobbies too. Like his paintings are really good too. We're very excited. He wants to come back for when he releases his book. He wants to come back on and talk about that, and I'm very excited to talk to him about that.
And he loves podcasts.
Oh yeah, yeah. I noticed that. He was a lot of fun. He's one of the few people that we've ever had on where it's like we originally had him only for like an hour window, because that's usually where we try to hold our episodes to it the longest. And yeah, by the time we were done, it was like 2 hours and 15 minutes in. Adam's like, "Oh, I got some editing to do." I think it's one of our. I think he kept it decently long though. I'm not sure, but he's a very funny man. He has a lot of wisdom. He's a lot of fun to talk to.
Oh yes,
listen to. I mean, I don't even think I spoke more than 10 words that entire episode. That
was like my interview with him too. Even at some point he was telling a story and he just said, we were on the phone and he said, "Am I talking too much?" And I said, "No, keep going."
Yeah, that's the great thing is like the host is like when you have someone on who just won't shut up, it's like, nope, this is just way easier for me. Keep going. It makes it way easier. Yeah, it's especially for like a lot of people that like we've had on are like, they haven't really been on a podcast before, it seems like. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like, oh, where's it go from here? It's like, like if there's downtime, like just keep talking. I mean, we can edit that out. Like this doesn't go out unedited. I mean, ours does, but I mean, only if you pay us money, you get to see that. But, but otherwise, yeah, it's edited. Like you just keep talking, man, like figure it out. But no, we've slowly started to get talk to more people who are like also podcasters, or at least do something like have been on podcasts before. So
what podcast do you guys like to listen to?
So again, I'm into true crime. So I listen to Necronomipod. They basically do what we do, but it's three best friends who they just sit around, drink, and talk about true crime. And they go through the way they structure it. It's like what I wish ours would become, but I just can't figure it out. The guy who leads it, Ian, is really good at research and writing an outline for them to follow. And then the other two are just funny. It's not even that they're super knowledgeable. It's just they're funny. I don't know how, because it's hard to do true crime and be funny because it's a sensitive topic. Mm-hmm. But they just get drunk and they'll go off on tangents for 10 minutes that have nothing to do with anything, but it's just something I can't not listen to. I'm there for the story, but I'm also there seeing what stupid things they'll talk about. So I listen to that. I listen to Dungeons Daddies, like I said. And then outside of that, I haven't really listened to a whole lot. We both listened to Lions Led by Donkeys for a while.
That's going to be the one.
Okay, Nick, your turn.
I listened to Lions Led by Donkeys, which is where it's hosted by a former military, I think he was a tank NCO, a tank sergeant or something. He was something.
Yeah,
he wasn't an officer, but he did something in a tank in Iraq.
I actually am reading his book right now, and it's really good. It's very interesting.
And he just talks about the huge military gaps in history. Everything from the Khmer Rouge in Laos. No. Yeah. Was Khmer Rouge Laos? I think it was,
I have no idea.
I think so. He just did one on the polar bear expedition where the U.S. sent a couple hundred or a couple thousand guys from Detroit to Russia at the end of World War One. He's done fronts of World War One. Just basically the greatest gaffes in history.
Basically the things where like someone did something.
Someone
really
screwed up really bad.
Yeah, someone did something really cool, or someone like the leader of that military just screwed up super bad, and it's like, how did you lose this?
I listened to a lot of the Bad Magic productions. So Dan Cummins, I'm not sure if you're familiar with him as a comedian.
Time Suck.
Yes, Time Suck. I listened to his other two. I listened to Scared to Death and Is We Dumb. They're both my weekly listens. They fill up my Wednesdays. Is We Dumb is some of the funniest stuff I've ever heard. It's just great comedy because I don't listen to a lot of comedy stuff. But it's really good. And then I recently got into horror, I'd say last year. And I've been just listening to a lot of horror stuff. As Jeff likes to say, I've tapped the conspiracy well. So the next viable option was horror. Because I also listen to a ton of conspiracy podcasts.
So you guys pretty much span the whole gamut of what you like to listen to.
Yeah, and then I have my daily news podcast too. And then I have my audiobooks.
Yeah, as you say, it's audiobooks for me. And then, it's my, Dungeons and Daddies is my comedy, true crime and comedy. And then, I'll listen to history. That's pretty much it.
All right, so we have a portion of the show, and it is called Shameless Self-Promotion.
Shameless self-promotion.
And this is where you can let our listeners know how they can follow you guys or get in touch with you or whatever other information you'd like to share about yourselves.
Yeah, so we actually have a link tree. Let me pull that up because I always forget the exact. So it's it's Linktree /YOUH82CIT. Spells out you hate to see it, but we slammed it down to make it not as wild to have to say. If you go to that, it links you to all of our social medias. It also links you to anywhere you can find we are on everywhere. So anywhere you can find podcasts, you can find You Hate to See It. There's also the top button is become a patron. We do our patron through Podbean because that's where we release through. That gets us out to everywhere. You click on that. We have different tiers. The $1 tier, you get access to our Discord, which you can talk to us in. And then you also get access to our monthly podcast that is strictly only on our patron, which is You Hate to See It Goes to the Movies. And that's where Adam makes me watch a specific movie that he thinks is revolutionary to the movies in some way, shape, or form, is a really, really good movie, or is just absolutely awful and you have to watch the dumpster fire. And then it's because I don't watch a lot of movies or take in a lot of media that are shows and movies. So that's our way of doing that and then monetizing it. And then, you go to Facebook, it's just type in You Hate to See It. We pop up. On Twitter, it's at YOUH82CIT. And that's the same for Instagram also.
Okay, Nick, you got anything else to throw in there?
Not really. If you want to hear either of our two just lovely voices, you can also find us on Twitch. We do stream on Twitch. We stream on Twitch too. So
okay. And when do new episodes of your show come out?
Every Monday.
Every Monday. Then we have it on podcast apps everywhere. Jeff and Nick from You Hate to See It. Guys, thank you so much. And, we will like to wish our best greetings to Adam, who is currently in jail for attempting to have a slap fight with Will Smith. And
it's relevant now. When this comes out, it's not.
I'm here for it. I'm here for it.
This will be a daily joke by the time this comes out.
Yeah, it's already been a joke. It was a joke when it happened.
All that time ago. Okay, guys, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Those dulcet tones can only mean one thing. It is time for Sherpa Samples. What is Sherpa Samples, you may ask? This is where your Sherpa does some work and he ventures out into Podcastia and he samples episodes of all sorts of podcasts that have been hitting the podcast charts. There's no one uniform chart, so I'm searching those charts all over the place. Doing all this hard work just for you rebels. And this week, we had a little bit of a theme going, I guess.
It's theme week. It's theme week. It's theme week.
And it's podcasts based on a story. Very often you have your podcasts that have your hosts or specific subjects, but these are based on stories, and some of them are true and some of them are fictional. Some of them have even been on TV as well. But I'll tell you what's going on with some of these episodes without giving too much away, I promise. Now, keep in mind that because these are serialized podcasts, I only listen to one episode, so I may not actually have the whole picture on these podcasts, but I can tell you what I've learned. I tried with most of them to sample the trailer and the first episode just to kind of get a feeling for what the story was all about. So I checked out a podcast called Magmel, and it is the fictional story of a spaceship, the USS Magmel, which was stranded 700 light years away from home. So they are in deep space, and there's a lot going on there. And I think it's a crew of mostly women, and definitely an interesting premise. I checked out the first chapter. I'm not sure what happens afterwards. It didn't give too much away, but it was pretty enjoyable and suspenseful pretty quickly. So I think if it keeps up at that pace, it's something that you may enjoy as well. I also listened to a couple of episodes of the Magnus Archives. So the Magnus Archives has to do with a group of explorers searching through these archives where a lot of scary and weird things happen while they're doing so. So this is one you definitely have to catch a lot of different episodes to get a real feeling for it. And there were also some mini stories too that had to do with horror that were separate from the Magnus Archives story as well. So if you're a fan of British horror, very British show, I think this is something that you might want to check out. Okay, moving on to the nonfiction podcasts. I heard a bunch of those too. So what did I listen to? I heard What Happened to Sandy Beale. What Happened to Sandy Beale is a true crime story involving the violent death of a young woman who died 40 years ago. Now, she was found dead in her car, and it was ruled suicide, but people think that it was, yes, I can say it, murder. So we hear what happened as they try to put together the pieces of the puzzle. And there are actually conversations with people who knew her in this story. It's done in a documentary style, as a matter of fact, not a reenactment. Also, there's We Crashed, the director's cut. And We Crashed is a show that is currently on the Apple TV Plus network. But I hadn't seen it, so I figured I'd check to see what it was about. And it was a story about the rise and fall of the business WeWork, creating workspaces for people. And there was a whole bunch of involvement and confusion and crazy things going on with that story. This one is also covered like a documentary as well. I guess to plug the TV show, it's called We Crashed, and it has Jared Leto and Anne Hathaway. Big stars in this one, folks. Big stars. Speaking of TV, we've got two more that were on TV as well. The Thing About Pam. Now, The Thing About Pam is originally from a Dateline story, and we've spoken about Dateline as a podcast with all its true crime, and and The Thing About Pam also ended up becoming a television series with Renee Zellweger. So it's about a woman who was murdered, and the suspicion turns to her husband. But then again, the suspicion arises to this woman, Pam, and there's a lot of complications involved in this story too. And I think the podcast tells it in a really interesting way. It's definitely a unique kind of story. It definitely had me interested right off the bat. And also, based on a true story, we have The Dropout, and that is a podcast that is the story of Elizabeth Holmes and the company Theranos that she founded. And that is also a TV program currently on the Hulu network if you wanted to check it out. But this was presented as a true crime documentary from ABC News, and it is done as a documentary and really cool stuff. Again, another really interesting story that will definitely want you listening to more. Another podcast that was pretty close to the top of the charts was the Trojan Horse Affair. And the story was based on a letter that appeared in Birmingham, England, that laid out an elaborate plot by Islamic extremists to infiltrate the city's schools. And the code name of it was Operation Trojan Horse. Again, that was one that I think you really have to listen to a lot of different chapters to really get the feel for the story. I kind of got a little bit of the background, and I'm sure like maybe listening to one or two more episodes, I probably would have gotten a little bit more into it. But it wasn't a bad podcast. It was very enjoyable, very different. It wasn't your typical true crime stuff that is flooding the internet. This is a real story based on a fake letter. And lastly, we have American Hostage, which was an audio drama, and it was based on a true event. And John Hamm is one of the main voices. He plays Fred Heckman, and he's a radio show host. And one day he gets a phone call from a guy who is holding someone at gunpoint. And what happens from there is, I don't know. I listened to the first episode and I really enjoyed it. That definitely a cool podcast to check out. John Hamm does a great job. But from what I can tell with this story, it definitely starts off like a roller coaster and drags you in right in that first chapter. I was definitely looking forward to another episode, but I had so many things to do, so I didn't listen to the rest of it. But maybe I may go back to it and I will check it out. American Hostage. There you have it. Podcasts based on stories. And I'm sure we will probably do another Sherpa Samples featuring podcasts that bring you stories. And if there is a podcast that you would like me to sample an episode for, whatever it might be, whether it's stories or interviews or comedy or whatever it might be, let me know. Message me on social media. That's Sherpalution, Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook, and I will check that out for you. You can also email me at jimthepodcastsherpa@gmail.com. Post something on social media too, and let's hear what you think about it too. I would love to have a little conversation with you about it. You are more than welcome to do that, Rebels. Okay, I'm almost out of breath, so I think it is time to move on out into the true story of the outro of this episode. You have been listening to Too Many Podcasts, and thank you so much for swinging by the Sherpa Chalet. Also, special thanks to Jeff and Nick for coming by also and letting us get to know them a little bit. Make sure you check out their podcast. Really interesting stuff. And you know what? If you've got a little free time, if you can go on maybe iTunes or even Spotify and leave the podcast a nice review, that helps more people get interested in the show. If you're liking it, spread the word. And you know what? You have my blessing. If you're on your computer and you see my episodes and you'd like to share them on social media, you are more than welcome to do that. Of course, it's not a problem. Just don't say that it's your podcast. Say it's my podcast. Steer them towards me. And where on social media might you catch some information on this podcast? Very simple. Sherpalution for Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And you can listen to this podcast also at my website, sherpalution.com, or on your favorite podcast apps. I'm sure you have a favorite, right? Maybe you like one more than the other, or maybe you like them all the same. It's okay. It doesn't matter. We're out of here, folks, and let's see what's coming up next week. What is coming up next week? I don't know. We'll have to find out. I'm looking forward to it, too. I hope you are. And don't forget, every Wednesday, new episodes. I'll be here. I'm everywhere. You've kind of picked that up, haven't you? All right. Mr. Bruce, I'm rambling away, and we've got to get out of here. Everybody, viva la Sherpalution. Bye.
Thanks for listening to Too Many Podcasts. Please disperse. You can go home now. I said you can go home now. Viva la Sherpalution. Viva la Sherpalution. Yo, come back now, you hear?